The social internet has been structured quite poorly for quite some time. However, it is starting to make motions in the right direction. Let's talk about that. When I was young, like 12 or 13, I started to have an interest in game development. I found a tiny online community of indie developers who were just messing around, making a little website for themselves. This website was simple. It was like a blogging platform and a place that you could post your games and rate each other's games and comment on them and whatnot. It was a great place for us to just hang out and talk about making games together. Little would I know that more than 15 years later, many of us still keep in touch, which is honestly pretty incredible. During my time on this website, I somehow managed to become a moderator and then administrator with server access. I ended up becoming a developer for the website. That was pretty fun, and it taught me how to do web development, which later became my career. All of this to say, I do web stuff professionally, and I've been doing it for a long time, specifically having gotten my start in web communities. While I do not like to refer to myself as an expert, this kind of gives me a leg up on discussions about web communities. So let's discuss! Legacy social media platforms are incongruent with the human mind. What's a legacy social media site? Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Legacy. Pretty much any website that still exists from the early social media boom of the late aughts. These websites were founded on the concept of the network effect, which actually has its roots all the way back into like PayPal, but I'm not going to get into that. The network effect is banking on the idea of people coming to the service because people are in the service. That's why people are so sticky with moving off of Facebook or moving to whatever other social media platform. Because of this, it is in that platform's best interest to have as many users as possible and give them as much access to every other user as possible. Suffice to say, this is not how humans do. We never evolved to talk to every other person on the entire planet all the time, anytime. That's not how we're supposed to do social things. We're supposed to know like a few dozen, few hundred people at most and only have a few close contacts. Now, of course, we're kind of able to handle this, but this creates new and confusing problems like parasocial relationships. Or in the case of a website like Twitter, it just completely obliterates the concept of nuance and ruins our ability to communicate with any kind of empathy. But there are 2 points that I think are the real crux of the problem: authority and organization. With a legacy social network, for example Twitter, you have a centralized authority that is an established corporation. They want to make money off of their platform. That means that they want to make money off of you using their platform. The interests of the administrating party do not align with the interests of the users. Does that sound like anything else in the world? As for the second point, structure. We often talk about how we've created these echo chambers, but we didn't create these echo chambers. The authorities did. Think about any page on a social media website that uses an algorithm to rank stuff for you. YouTube suggestions, Twitter's homepage, the Facebook news feed, all that kind of stuff. The most egregious example is likely the TikTok For You page. This is a system that takes your preferences and dials them in so strongly that you tend to only see content from people who directly match your preferences. However, you do not know who these people are, so they are presented to you as strangers. They are presented to you as just what's there. That is not a community. That is an echo chamber. So echo chambers versus community. Let's dive in. I believe we are well into the beginning of a transitionary period between legacy social media and self-governed communities. More specifically, a return to self-governed communities. So whereas legacy social media websites would use an algorithm to deliver content to you that keeps you engaged, hence echo chamber, a self-governed community is a closed group that has administrators and moderators that are a part of the community and help keep it safe. There is a big difference there in terms of social intent. One is a community that wants to be together and share in ideas. Sure, maybe they all agree with each other, but that's not an echo chamber. It's an intentional community. The echo chamber, on the other hand, is a place where people shout and hear back similar ideas and are convinced that that's just how the world is. They must be right because everything they're seeing from these unknown people agrees with them. Worse, these legacy social media sites let their algorithms reel people into these echo chambers instead of these people opting into them. There is a big difference between being pulled into a community by way of what is effectively a psyop versus you intentionally joining a community because it's a group of people that you want to interact with. That's not to say that there's not horrible, problematic, closed communities on the internet. There absolutely are. But the difference is, if they're a closed community, they can't be spewing out random things that might get picked up by the algorithm and delivered onto your great uncle's Facebook page. Let's dive a bit deeper away from the legacy and towards the communities. There's a transitionary group of websites that you definitely have heard of. Let's start with Reddit and Discord. Now, Reddit has problems, and Reddit is a social media platform, absolutely. but their structure is to have a bunch of sub-forums that all aggregate into the main page. These sub-forums have moderators that govern the community and enforce a set of rules. Each sub-forum can have its own rules, its own community, its own style, and they can even close off from the rest of the website. Reddit still has the problem of a centralized administrator, though. The actual company, Reddit, has a profit line that they need to make sure goes up. It is very unlikely that the social goal of any given member of any given subreddit is to make the website have more money. And unfortunately, Reddit's approach to this is to shoehorn in more advertisement options and ways for users to basically get ripped off via like NFTs or whatever now. Then we have apps like Discord. We also have Slack and a few other things that are very similar. For the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to say Discord. Discord has been a borderline phenomenon among people who want to create communities. It takes virtually no effort at all to make a new server on Discord and just start inviting people. The moderators and administrators of each server can then curate who can even come in the first place. You can either have it be a closed community or an open community with rules that you moderate and kick people out and whatnot. There's a huge difference here about the malleability of governing these spaces. On Twitter, for example, you have to really piss them off to get banned. You have to violate their terms of service. On a community, if you're a dick, they can just kick you out. And that's a good thing! In what human space can you just get away with being an asshole to people and not face repercussions? It's the same thing online. Deplatforming being a concept at all and effectively being the equivalent of an online death is ridiculous. Back in the era of forums and whatnot, if you got kicked out of a forum, it's probably because you deserved it, or maybe a power-tripping moderator here and there. But it wasn't because a company is enforcing their terms of service that you crossed. It was because a community made a decision to remove you. I'm not saying that that will always be just, and I'm not saying that Discord moderators are inherently good people or whatever. But if you have a community that is healthy and has appointed moderators and administrators to keep that healthy community going, that's a much better way to go about things. There are even forums that are out there that require you to pay to get an account. And if you get kicked out, you're welcome back in, just pay us more money. So you basically get punished for breaking their rules financially. Or you have communities that require that you prove some kind of identity or use a college email address, something that's a little bit harder than just making a fake account and joining and spamming. Wouldn't it be incredibly nice if you could know that every person you were talking to is a genuine person? And don't take my word for it, the younger generation has already identified this. There is a reason that they are not going into these big social media platforms. They don't want to be exposed to all that crap. They just want to talk to their friends, and who doesn't? And yet, these platforms are still a part of the transitionary period. So let's talk about what could come next. You've probably heard of the term Web3, and that is not what I'm talking about here. I will not give it any more breath than it deserves. Web3 is nothing. If you would like to learn more than you ever need to know about all of that stuff, I highly recommend watching the video Line Goes Up, The Problem with NFTs by Folding Ideas. Moving on from there, let's talk about Federation. And no, not like Star Wars. Is it Star Wars? I don't really watch Star Wars. Federation on the internet is the idea of servers and services interacting with each other. You are already using federated software. It's called email. While everyone is trying to figure out what the next iteration of the internet is going to be, we're still using email. And while it's not perfect, it is incredible that it's so widely adopted and has stood the test of time. Very briefly, let's go into what it means for email to be federated. Look at an email address. Let's just use hello@example.com. Hello is the user. At is saying at the server being example.com. I want to send this mail to the user named hello@example.com. So I send out my email and the system looks up example.com and then knocks on their door and says, hey, I've got an email for a user named hello. The servers behind example.com then say, oh great, yeah, we've got a user called hello. Go ahead and send it my way. That is all. That's federation. That is me sending stuff between servers using a protocol called email. Well, technically the protocol is called something else. Let's just call it email for now. This concept does not require having a central authority control everything. I'm not sending the email through Facebook. I'm not sending the email through Twitter. I'm just sending the email. Yes, Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, all that stuff exists to make email really easy to use online, for sure. But there is nothing stopping you from just setting up your own email server and interfacing with the rest of the world through it. Every individual person right now already has the ability to just self-host all the services they might need. It's horribly inconvenient and it requires a lot of technical knowledge, so I do not fault you for not doing that already if you don't. But how can we make that work for us? How can we use federation while making it not ridiculously difficult to actually do? And how can we apply the principles of federation to other things besides just email? I don't want to compose emails all the time. Sometimes I just want to shitpost. Welcome to the Fediverse. The Fediverse is a space that actually already exists, and it's relatively active, which is pretty amazing. But what is it? The Fediverse is a collection of largely free and open source software that can all communicate with each other in order to reproduce a lot of the functionality that you're already used to with legacy social media websites. However, they also have a few added capabilities that bring in some of the best parts of the self-governed communities. There are a ton of services available in the Fediverse, but I'm going to focus on one, which is likely the most well-known one, which is Mastodon. Mastodon is effectively Fediverse Twitter. It's a microblogging platform that really looks and acts just like Twitter. It's got posts and reposts and favorites and all that stuff. It's actually kind of somewhere between Tumblr and Twitter, but let's just say Twitter. So what is Mastodon? Well, just like Twitter, you make an account on a website, you have a UI, you post posts and repost other things and favorite stuff and have a timeline and all that good stuff. There is, however, one critical difference. A lot like email, you have an account on a specific website, and it's not gonna be mastodon.com. See, the way it works is individual communities can run their own Mastodon server, which can then talk to every other Mastodon server. So you have that intentional community with the moderators and administrators that can control their server and talk to everyone else's communities. What this does is allow you greater control over how your social interactions work online. If you want to, you can make an absolutely closed-off Mastodon server and only the community can use it. Or you can talk to every other server and talk to anyone in the Fediverse. But even more powerful is you can actually defederate with specific servers that are problematic. If you hold a specific value very dear and there's another server out there full of people that you just do not want to interact with, you can just cut that entire server off. Is there a server hosting a whole bunch of transphobic Nazis? Just get rid of them. It's a pretty amazing way to restructure the social internet, and I've been on it for years, and it's been really great. It absolutely has its problems, especially around user adoption and onboarding. It also has a few problems with just problematic communities springing up. But those problems are very fixable, and they are things that are currently being worked on right now. And the trajectory that this has all been on has been pretty incredible. But besides just Mastodon, the Fediverse has all sorts of other services that are, again, nascent, but rising. There's an Instagram equivalent, there's a YouTube equivalent, there are blogging equivalents, and they all talk to each other. So I, on Mastodon, could follow a Fediverse YouTube equivalent user. That's awesome. So let's move that email example over to Mastodon. You join a Mastodon server at example.com, and you make an account called Hello. You are now hello at example.com on Mastodon. Everyone else on the example.com server can just call you hello, and anyone off of your server can call you hello at example.com, and it still pings you, and you get notifications, and there's the cross chat and everything. This structure means that individual communities can own and operate their own social media without being cut off from the rest of the world. And it only takes one, maybe a couple of people in that community to know how to actually manage the server in order to manage the server. And then you can host hundreds, if not thousands, of people. And then the community can just pitch in and pay for the server, and you completely eliminate the for-profit company that's trying to squeeze ad revenue out of you by manipulating your emotions. Is it a perfect solution? No. Is it taking off like a rocket ship? No. Does it take user education for us to get there? Yeah. But as generations continue to earlier and earlier have deep roots into the internet in the way that they communicate and generate culture, I think this is the direction that we're going to be moving. Of course, the legacy social companies are going to do everything they can to prevent that from happening. They want to lock everything down, and they want to keep you on their platform. And so again, we're in a transitionary period. When the internet was much younger, the idea of a personal homepage was about the extent of the social internet. You could spin up a server and have whatever you want on there, and you totally owned that. Anyone who wanted to come see your content would just go to your website. We made it more convenient with blogs, and then we had microblogging and social media platforms where you would have your own page there, and that effectively replaced the personal homepage, which made it really convenient and gave way more people access, but removed the ability to wholly own your own social online identity. And I think people increasingly crave to have that back, and I really hope that we do move in that direction. I strongly believe that a sustainable, human-oriented internet looks a lot like the older days of the internet, with self-governed communities and wholly owned social identities online. And all of this can be done today with existing technologies on the cheap. You do not need a blockchain. Thank you for listening to me ramble for far too long. I very much appreciate your viewership, and if you would be so kind as to do the typical YouTube things, I would very much appreciate it. Don't forget to follow me on the Bad Legacy websites and check out my community-managed Discord. Thank you so much, and be well.